thought it was a mistake I could bury. One night, one choice, a moment I would never repeat. But then I missed my period, and the test turned positive. My husband was thrilled. He kissed my stomach, painted the nursery. But the child growing inside me wasn't his. It belonged to someone else. His brother. I never meant to fall into this. I never planned to lie this long. But the truth didn't stay buried. Because the truth was in my son's eyes, in my husband's silence, and in the envelope he found in a drawer I thought he'd never open. This is my confession, the one I never wanted to tell. But now, I don't have a choice. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who did something like this. Not to my husband, not to his family, not to myself. But here I am, telling a story I once promised myself I would take to my grave. And it started in the most ordinary way, with a house guest, a familiar face, a trusted name. His brother. No warning, no signal, no moment where everything suddenly shifted. Just a slow, almost imperceptible slide into something that felt dangerous only once it was too late to stop. His name is Ethan. He's 2 years younger than Mark. Taller, louder, the kind of man who walks into a room and pulls gravity with him. I'd known him since college. He was the wild one. The fun uncle in Mason's eyes. The guy who never settled down, never committed, never seemed to stay in one place for too long. When he asked if he could stay with us for a couple weeks, between apartments, between jobs, it didn't seem like a big deal. Mark didn't even hesitate. "Of course," he said. "Your family." I agreed. I smiled. I offered to clear out the guest room. I didn't know then how much damage could move into a house with a single overnight bag. The first few days were easy. Ethan was charming, helpful, the kind of guest who cooked breakfast unasked and made our son laugh until his stomach hurt. Mark was thrilled to have his brother around. It reminded him of old times, of growing up side by side. For me, it was just company, a fresh dynamic in the house. But somewhere between day 10 and day 15, something shifted. It wasn't obvious. It wasn't physical. But it was real. I remember standing at the sink, washing dishes, when Ethan walked behind me to grab a glass. He didn't touch me. He didn't say anything. But the air changed. I felt it on my skin, like static before a storm. And I didn't hate it. That's the part I wish I could rewrite. Not the action. Not yet. But the fact that I felt something and didn't shut it down. I told myself I was just lonely. Mark had been working long hours again. Tired, distracted. Our conversations had shrunk down to logistics and schedules. I knew he loved me, but I also knew we'd drifted. And Ethan? He saw it. That distance. That gap I hadn't realized was wide enough for someone else to slip into. He started staying up later, sitting in the kitchen with me after Mark had gone to bed. At first, it was innocent. He told me stories from his traveling years, made me laugh. I told him about my work, about motherhood, about things Mark stopped asking me about a long time ago. It felt like talking to a friend, until it didn't. One night he asked if I was happy. I remember the way he said it. Soft, quiet, like he already knew the answer. I didn't respond. I just looked down at my tea and stirred it even though it was already cold. He reached across the table and touched my hand. Just once. Just briefly. But it was the first moment I felt something I didn't know how to name. I left the kitchen a minute later, said goodnight, closed the door to our bedroom and stood there in the dark, heart racing, not because something had happened, but because I knew something could. And it terrified me. The next morning, I avoided him. I packed Mason's lunch, made coffee, kept my eyes on everything except him. He didn't push. He didn't even act differently. But something had cracked open, and we both felt it. Mark didn't notice. Or maybe he did, but didn't want to. It was 2 weeks later when it actually happened. I'll tell that part next. But right now, what matters is this. It didn't start with betrayal. It started with attention, with being seen, with hearing my own name in someone else's voice and realizing how long it had been since it sounded like it belonged to me. I didn't plan to cross that line, but I stepped closer to it day by day, word by word, until I looked down and realized the ground beneath me wasn't mine anymore. And Ethan? He wasn't just Mark's brother anymore. He was the person who made me feel awake again, even if it cost me everything. Ethan moved in on a Sunday. I remember that because the house was already full of Sunday rhythms. Grocery lists, laundry piles, Mason's half-finished science project on the dining room table. Mark carried in Ethan's single duffel bag like it was nothing, clapped him on the back and said, "Make yourself at home, man." And he did, too easily. The first couple of nights felt harmless. Ethan helped around the house more than I expected, took the trash out without being asked, fixed the sliding door that Mark had promised to get to for weeks. He was relaxed, friendly, a break in the usual routine. Even Mason liked having him around. He'd always adored his uncle, saw him as the cooler version of his dad. At first, I did too. I hadn't realized how much of myself I had given up for that routine. I wasn't unhappy, not in a loud or dramatic way. I just felt reduced. My days were full but not meaningful. Tasks, errands, parenting, dinner, sleep. Repeat. I didn't miss passion. I missed feeling like I was still someone outside of all of it. Ethan started finding me in those in-between spaces. At first, just casual. He'd come sit at the kitchen island while I prepped dinner or linger near the hallway while I folded laundry. He didn't flirt. Not openly. He just listened. More than Mark had in months. He asked about my writing, my college days, the music I used to play when I thought no one was listening. Little things. But the kind of things that make you feel seen again. And I responded. Not because I was seeking it, but because I was starving for it. I still remember the night I started wearing mascara again. It wasn't a decision. Just something I did without thinking. I was wearing a faded t-shirt, but I put on eyeliner before coming downstairs. And when Ethan looked up from his laptop and said, "You look nice tonight," I felt it everywhere. Mark never commented anymore. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't notice. Ethan did. We never touched. Not then. But emotionally, something had already started to bind us. He waited until Mark went to bed to start those deeper conversations. He knew I stayed up late. I liked the quiet of the house. He started staying up too. And one night, while we sat on opposite ends of the couch, sharing a blanket I didn't realize we were both holding, he told me he used to have a crush on me back in college. That he never said anything because I was already with Mark. I laughed it off nervously, told him he was ridiculous, but I didn't leave the room. I stayed. We both stayed. There's something dangerous about emotional intimacy that happens in secret. It builds slowly, but the guilt doesn't. Guilt shows up later, when you realize how far you've already gone. I started deleting texts, not because they were explicit, but because they were personal. Too personal. Mark never checked my phone, but I cleared the conversations anyway. Ethan started doing the same. I told myself I had it under control, that we hadn't done anything wrong, that I was just enjoying attention I hadn't felt in years. But I started lying. Small things, where I went during the day, what I was thinking about when I stared too long at the stove. And then one night, after dinner, Mark left to pick up Mason from a sleepover and Ethan stayed behind. We were in the kitchen. I was putting dishes away. He leaned against the counter, arms folded, just watching me. There was silence for a long time before he said, "Does he still make you feel like a woman?" The words hit hard. I turned toward him slowly. I should have left the room. I should have said yes. But instead, I said nothing. He took a step forward, then another. I didn't move. He reached up and touched my cheek, and I let him. We didn't kiss, not yet. But something passed between us in that moment, something irreversible. He stepped away just as we heard the garage door open. Mark's voice calling for help with Mason's overnight bag. I moved quickly, busying myself, pretending. Ethan disappeared into the hallway, and just like that, we were normal again. But we weren't. And we knew it. That night, lying in bed next to Mark, I stared at the ceiling and realized I had crossed a line I swore I never would. Maybe not physically, but emotionally, I was no longer loyal. I hadn't been for weeks. Ethan moved into our house like family. He made coffee, folded laundry, helped my son with his math homework. And in between all that, he slipped into the space my husband left open. And I let him. Not all at once. Just a little at a time. I didn't think it would go further, but it did. It happened on a Wednesday night. Mark was out of town for a conference. Nothing unusual. He traveled once every couple of months, usually just 1 or 2 nights, always checking in by text and FaceTime. Mason was staying at his friend's house, a last-minute sleepover. It was one of those rare evenings where the house felt unusually quiet, still, and exposed. I should have used the time to rest, clean, watch something mindless and forgettable. But instead, I stayed in the kitchen too long, lingering over a glass of wine, already feeling the tremor in the air. Ethan had been upstairs for most of the evening, working on his laptop. Or so he said. When he came down, he didn't say much, just leaned in the doorway, watching me rinse the wine glass I hadn't even finished. I didn't ask why he was staring. I didn't break the silence. The tension between us had been building for weeks. What happened next wasn't impulsive. It wasn't a slip. It was the result of every small moment we had allowed to stretch and deepen and coil until the silence between us was a yes. We hadn't spoken out loud. He didn't walk over right away. He waited. Like he was giving me time to stop what we both knew was about to happen. But I didn't move. I didn't say no. And when he finally stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat from his chest, he said it quietly. "We don't have to do anything." I looked up at him. "But you want to." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. When he kissed me, it was slow, measured, like he was asking with every second if I would pull away. I didn't. Not then. Not even when his hands found my back and held me like I might disappear. It didn't happen in a rush. There was no frantic fumbling or desperation. We moved like people who had already played the moment in their minds 100 times. And when it was over, when we sat quietly, not speaking, not touching, I felt something hollow settle inside me. Not regret. Not yet. Just the reality of what I had done. I had crossed the line. And there was no going back. Ethan didn't stay in my room. He left after a few minutes, quietly, without a word. I don't even remember if he looked back at me. I stayed in bed, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling like I had the night after he first touched my face. Only now there was no pretending. No more almosts. No more justifications. I had slept with my husband's brother. And even though I told myself it was just one night, I knew better, because something had changed. The next morning, the house felt different. Ethan left early. Said he had an interview, though I never asked where. Mark texted that he was landing late that evening, asked if I needed anything. I told him no. I spent the day pretending, cleaning, grocery shopping, returning emails, but nothing felt real. I thought maybe Ethan would bring it up that night. But he didn't. He acted like nothing had happened. Like we were just roommates again. I played along. Not because I believed we could go back, but because I didn't know what else to do. Mark came home just after 9. Mason had already gone to bed. I hugged my husband, smiled, asked how the trip went. He looked tired, grateful to be home. He kissed me and thanked me for keeping things running. I nodded, pretended not to feel like I was standing in a house made of glass. We went to bed like normal, and I lay awake beside him for hours, trying to match the man I had betrayed with the warmth of his breathing beside me, trying to make sense of how I could still love him and do what I had done. The next morning, Ethan wasn't at breakfast. He had left early again. A pattern started forming. He avoided me and I let him. Maybe he regretted it. Maybe he didn't. We never spoke about that night. Not directly. Not once. But every time we passed in the hallway, something tightened between us. Every time he looked at me too long, I felt like I was being seen and erased at the same time. I told myself it had to end there, that it couldn't happen again. But endings don't come clean when they're built on silence. And secrets don't stay buried when there's still a part of you that's listening for the knock. I didn't think much of it the first day I felt sick. Just a wave of nausea while doing dishes. A tightness in my chest when I smelled the garlic I was chopping for dinner. I blamed it on stress, on guilt, on everything except the possibility I couldn't afford to consider. It didn't cross my mind, not seriously, until I missed my period. Even then, I convinced myself it was anxiety. My body punishing me for what I'd done. A hormonal rebellion. But when the second week came and I still hadn't bled, something cold settled under my ribs. A dull certainty I tried to ignore. I bought the test alone. One of those early detection kits from the pharmacy 2 towns over so no one would recognize me. I kept it in the glove box for 3 days before I even brought it inside. And when I finally took it, I couldn't look. I left it face down on the bathroom counter and paced the hallway like I was waiting for a verdict I already knew. 2 lines. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat on the edge of the tub, the plastic stick in my hand, and stared into the floor tiles until the grout patterns blurred. Pregnant. The word felt unreal, like it belonged to someone else. Mark had been home for weeks by then. Things were normal, or at least pretending to be. Ethan still lived with us, though the distance between us had grown into something rigid. We barely spoke. He avoided eye contact. I didn't push. Maybe we both believed that if we never spoke about that night, it would vanish from memory. But now it was back, inside me. The problem was math. Mark and I hadn't been intimate in almost a month before that night. Maybe longer. I couldn't even remember clearly. But after that, we had. A few times. Awkward, hesitant reconnections. Efforts on both sides to find our way back to each other. So maybe it was his. But maybe it wasn't. And the not knowing was worse than anything else. I waited a week before I said anything. I told Mark first. That part wasn't optional. I found him folding laundry in our bedroom. He looked up, smiled, asked if I needed something. And I just blurted it out. I'm pregnant. He froze, arms half full of towels, and stared at me like I'd said something in a foreign language. What? I took a test. A few days ago. He dropped the towels on the bed, came toward me slowly. Are you serious? I nodded. I didn't smile. I couldn't. He laughed. A soft, surprised laugh, not joyful, just stunned. Wow. Okay. I mean, are we ready for this again? I forced a smile. I don't know, but here we are. He hugged me, held me tight. And I stood there in his arms and felt like the worst kind of fraud. Because he was already imagining another baby, a sibling for Mason, a second chance. And I couldn't stop running the dates in my head like equations that never added up right. I didn't tell him about the doubt. Not then, not yet. Because what do you do when the man who loves you is celebrating a life that might not be his? You stay quiet, you swallow it, you buy time. Ethan found out 2 days later. He overheard Mark telling Mason. The excitement in their voices was impossible to miss. Later that night, after the house had quieted, he knocked on my bedroom door. Just once. Softly. I opened it. He looked exhausted. pale. When? He asked. I knew what he meant. A few weeks ago. He exhaled. Are you sure? No. Silence stretched between us. He nodded. Are you going to find out? I shook my head. What good would that do? He didn't argue. Does Mark know it could be mine? Number, and he's not going to. He looked like he wanted to say more, but instead he said, I should move out. I didn't stop him. He left 3 days later, packed quietly. No dramatic scene, just a duffel bag and a goodbye that didn't feel like closure. I watched from the window as he pulled out of the driveway and didn't look back. Mark thought it was sudden, but not suspicious. Maybe he got a job offer, he said. He's always been like that. I nodded, said I was happy for him. I never told him the truth. Not about that night. Not about the timeline. Not about the question that sat quietly between my lungs every single day. Whose child am I carrying? And how long do I have before that answer forces its way into the light? The first ultrasound felt like a punishment. Mark came with me, his hand wrapped around mine in the waiting room like nothing was wrong. Like this baby was the beginning of something beautiful. I watched his face as the tech moved the wand across my stomach, watched his eyes widen when he heard the heartbeat. And I wanted to disappear. I smiled for him, laughed when he said, Still can't believe we're doing this again. I let him kiss my cheek and call Mason after the appointment to tell him the baby looked strong like him. And the whole time I sat there feeling like a thief, stealing joy I didn't deserve. We didn't tell many people yet, just close family. Mark's parents were thrilled. My sister cried. Mason was unsure at first, but over time he started getting excited. I watched my family wrap themselves in this idea of a new beginning, and every moment made it harder to imagine tearing it apart. I kept the lie like a secret you protect with your life. There were moments, tiny cracks where I thought about telling him. Mark would sit beside me at night, his hand resting on my stomach, whispering, You're doing so good, babe. And I'd feel my throat tighten. I'd imagine the words, There's a chance this child isn't yours. But I could never say them, because the second I did, everything we had rebuilt would fall apart. I told myself it didn't matter. That biology wasn't everything. That love was what made a father. Mark had already chosen this baby, embraced it with everything he had. I clung to that. I told myself over and over, this baby is his because he believes it is. But that didn't stop the fear. Not when I looked in the mirror. Not when I heard Mason's voice saying, Will the baby look like me? Not when I remembered the shape of Ethan's smile or the curve of his jaw. Every moment of happiness came with a shadow. And that shadow got darker when I found the test in my purse. I don't even remember putting it there. The second one. The one I told myself I'd never use. But I hadn't thrown it away. I'd kept it. Like a backup plan. A truth I was still too afraid to face. It sat there for days. And then one night, when Mark and Mason were both asleep, I took it. This time, it wasn't a pregnancy test. It was a paternity test. A kit I'd ordered online under a fake name, delivered in discreet packaging, hidden behind cleaning supplies in the laundry room. I didn't have Ethan's DNA, but I had Mark's on a used toothbrush tucked in the holder we shared. I mailed it in the next morning, and then I waited. For 2 weeks, I walked around like I was strapped to a bomb no one else could hear ticking. Mark planned the nursery, painted one wall a soft gray, talked about names, joked about being outnumbered if it was another boy. I tried to be present. I tried to smile. But every day was just survival. And then the envelope came. Plain, unmarked, thin. I opened it in the bathroom with shaking hands, locked door, fan on. The world narrowed to a single piece of paper. Probability of paternity, 0%. I dropped to the floor. No tears, just air rushing out of my lungs like someone had punched me. Ethan was the father. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep the night after. I sat in the nursery, staring at the wall Mark had painted, and thought about how easily lies grow roots, how they become part of the house, the routine, the family. I thought about telling him, but I couldn't, because by then we were too far in. Too much love had been built around the lie. And Mark looked happy again. He kissed my belly at night. He made late-night runs for ice cream. He told his friends he couldn't wait to be a dad again. What would it do to him? What would it do to Mason? To tell the truth now would destroy something that had finally started to heal. So I kept it. I folded the paper, buried it at the back of a drawer I never opened, and told myself it was the right thing to do. That Mark didn't need biology to be this baby's father. That secrets sometimes are a kind of mercy. I believed that for a while. Until he found the envelope. I came home from the grocery store and found Mark standing in the hallway with the envelope in his hands. He wasn't angry. Not at first. He just looked confused. Like he couldn't quite piece together what he was holding. I froze. The keys still in my hand. Grocery bags dangling from my wrist. My mouth suddenly dry. "What is this?" he asked. I didn't answer. My eyes went to the drawer in the hallway table, the one I hadn't touched in weeks. I had hidden the envelope beneath old bills and expired coupons, stupidly thinking no one would ever look there. "I found it when I was looking for the stamps," he said, holding the paper like it might burn him. "Why do we have a paternity test in this house?" I opened my mouth, but no words came. Not yet. He unfolded the paper. 0%? Are you telling me? I stepped forward, but he backed away. Mark Dash. Is it mine or not? I couldn't lie anymore. Not after everything. "No," I said. "It's not." He dropped the envelope like it had stung him. His face didn't change much. Just his eyes. They went distant. Cold. "Whose is it?" he asked, though I think he already knew. I hesitated, and that silence gave him his answer. "Ethan?" he said flatly. I nodded. "It was just once." He laughed, sharp, bitter. "Just once? That makes it better?" I didn't know. I wasn't sure until I took the test. "You lied to me, for months. I didn't want to lose you." "You already did." Those words didn't come loud. They didn't need to. They cut through the air like glass. I tried to reach for him. He stepped back. "You let me name him," he said, voice cracking. "You let me paint his room. You watched me fall in love with a child that isn't mine." I didn't plan it. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. But it did, and you made every choice to keep it going. He didn't yell. He didn't slam a door. He just turned and walked upstairs. I heard the bedroom door click shut, and then nothing. That night, he didn't sleep in the house. He left without a word. I don't know where he went. He didn't come back the next day either. When Mason asked where Dad was, I told him he was visiting a friend. The lie tasted foul in my mouth, but I couldn't bring myself to tell him yet. Not until I knew what was going to happen. Mark came back the third day. He looked like he hadn't slept. Eyes sunken, jaw tight. The way he always looked when he was trying not to fall apart in front of Mason. We sat in the living room after Mason went to bed. He didn't sit close. Just on the edge of the couch, arms crossed. "I'm not ready to decide anything," he said, "but I needed you to know that this changes everything." "I know." He nodded. "I love Mason. I always will. But I don't know if I can do this again. With a child that isn't mine. Not like this. Not after a lie." I didn't argue. I couldn't. He stood. "I'll be here for Mason. I'm not abandoning him, but I need time. I need space. Are you leaving? I don't know. He looked at me for a long time. What hurts the most isn't that you made a mistake. It's that you let me live in the lie while you knew the truth. He walked out again, this time with a bag, and I sat on the floor in the silence he left behind, with nothing but the sound of the baby's heartbeat still echoing in my ears from the last ultrasound. It's been almost a year. Mark comes around. He's kind, polite, but distant. He plays with Mason. He holds the baby sometimes. He never calls him his, just the baby. Sometimes he. I raise him alone. I never told Ethan. I haven't spoken to him since he left. I don't know if I ever will. The baby looks like him. Sometimes I stare too long at the curve of his mouth, the shape of his eyes, and I feel sick with guilt. Other times I just see a baby. A boy who didn't ask to be born into this mess. And I hold him tighter than I probably should. Mason is doing okay. He's quiet but steady. I don't know what Mark told him. I don't know how much he's pieced together, but he hasn't asked questions. And me? I'm still here, still carrying the weight of every choice I made. Still waking up in a house where echoes live in the walls. There's no neat ending here, no closure, no redemption. Only the truth I finally told, and the price I'm still paying for it.